back to PH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and I am ranking the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty commanders. I typically do a top 10 list from each set, but with this set, I was looking at the commanders and I wasn't sure how to go about it. This is just a very weird set when it comes to the legendary creatures. There's a lot that are really, really bad. There's a lot that are really, really powerful and are going to be super popular. There's 45 commanders overall between the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty and the Neon Dynasty commander sets. So I decided instead I would just rank them all. And how I am ranking them is just on popularity, right? Essentially how they're going to impact the format. The more popular a commander is, the more it's going to be an impact on the format, of course. And I find that typically commanders are more popular based on three characteristics. First of all, how powerful they are. Obviously, that's going to always play a part. Secondly, how unique they are. If there's no other commander that is doing what they are doing. And thirdly, how versatile they are. So how many different directions can you go in, right? If you look at Atraxa, for example, currently the most popular commander in the format, once again, there is a commander that certainly is powerful, it is unique, and then also there's a lot of different ways you can go with it, right? You don't have to build an Atraxa deck the same way. That's, to me, what makes commanders popular. So that's what I'm going to be evaluating these on. So let's get to the list. And for me, the Myojin are going to be at the bottom of the list. So coming in at number 45 is Myojin of Towering Might. I'm not going to talk about these much. I'm really going to blow through them. I already covered this in the spoiler video where I talked about they knew these were going to be commander cards, but yet they still had that cast from your hand phrase in there, which I just don't understand. That just makes them really bad in commander. And you know, I'm a guy who advocates for playing underwhelming commanders, but this is one situation where you already have a commander that is going to be really expensive and the abilities they gave them are actually not that powerful. And then on top of that, you have to be able to cast it from your hand. That's rough, really rough. I think the green one of all of them is the worst. Just putting +1/+1 counters on your creatures, not very good. Next up at 44 is going to be the red one, Myojin of Roaring Blades. Dealing 7 damage to up to 3 targets is great. You know, I mean, it's very usable, but it's not very exciting. I mean, there certainly is a whole ton of cards in the history of the game that are already doing that. There's already commanders that do that. So there's not really any uniqueness here at all. Coming in at number 43 is Myojin of Blooming Dawn, the white one. This one's a little more interesting because it's making colorless spirit tokens, and you know, you could go a spirit tribal route with that. Also, it's creating a spirit token for each permanent you control, so that, you know, can be quite a bit. That's your lands and everything. So if you have 10 permanents in play, creating 10 1/1 spirits is pretty good. And then if you have some spirit tribal stuff to help you out there, you know, it's not bad. Coming in at number 42 is Myojin of Cryptic Dreams, the blue one. And you remove that indestructible counter to copy target permanent spell you control 3 times. That's pretty interesting. I mean, there's definitely a lot of ways you can go with that. What I don't like about it is it has to be a permanent spell. It can't even be a normal spell. It can't be like an expropriate. It has to be an actual permanent spell. Also, it can't be a permanent, so it can't be something you already have in play. So when you finally get your commander in play, you have to wait until you cast that big permanent spell before you can use this ability. So it is very limiting there. You know, all of these abilities, they've really limited them on top of the fact that you have that cast from hand. However, the blue one does have a little bit of an interesting ability. So that's why I think it's going to be a little more popular. Coming in at 41 is Myojin of Grim Betrayal, the black one. And this one I think will be the most popular of the bunch just because I think it's, first of all, a lot easier because you're in black to get the important pieces you need. The command beacon or maybe the Netherborn altar to get your commander in hand. That's going to be really, really important. You also have access to Daring Fiend Bonder, which can put an indestructible counter on your commander. So that's a way you can get around that cast thing. And then also, I think that's a very build-aroundable ability, right? Put onto the battlefield under your control all creature cards and all graveyards that were put there from anywhere this turn. So you're going to have your commander, which is indestructible. You can cast that damnation, destroy all creatures. Your commander will be fine. Then you remove the indestructible counter, put all those creatures under your control. It's sort of like a mini Rise of the Dark Realms. Not too shabby. I think you could definitely build a deck around that. So I think it will be the most popular of the group. Coming in at number 40, and now I'm going to talk about the Gauchintes because those are also going to be at the bottom. I thought they would be a little more popular than the Myojins though, just because they're a little easier to cast. That's basically the only reason why I think they'll be more popular. At the bottom for the Gauchintes though is Gauchinte of Lost Wisdom, the blue one. And again, I'm not going to talk about these much. They're really not going to be very popular, no doubt about that. just because the fact that there isn't enough shrines and it really limits it. I thought they were actually going to print more shrines. I thought there was going to be another shrine of each monocolored cycle in this set, and they didn't do that. They just have the Gauchintes, and that is all. So that really limits where you can go with these guys. And the blue one is just milling, so you're going to pay 1, and if you do, target player mills X cards where X number of shrines you control, so they're probably only going to mill 1 card unless you can have another shrine out. Whew, that's pretty bad. Coming in at 39 is Gauchinte of Ancient Wars, the red one. Again, very limiting. There's only a couple other shrines you can put in the deck. At the beginning of your end step, you can pay 1. If you do, it deals X damage to target player or planeswalker, where X number of shrines you control, so you can't even hit creatures with it. That's what I think really limits this one. Coming in at 38 is Gauchinte of Boundless Vigor, the green one. And at the beginning of your end step, you can pay 1. When you do, you can put a +1/+1 counter on target shrine for each shrine you control. So again, so limiting. You can only put counters on shrines. You can't even put them on other creatures, which is very weird. And obviously, you're going to want to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature. So really, your commander is the only target for this ability, right? So you're basically just putting a +1/+1 counter on your commander every turn, which is, you know, it's okay. Coming in at number 37 is going to be Gauchinte of Shared Purpose, the white one. And at the beginning of your end step, you can pay 1. If you do, create a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token for each shrine you control. That's not bad. And, you know, again, you can do Spirit Tribal. There is a decent amount of mono white Spirit Tribal here. So you can do the shrines and you can also do the Spirit Tribal. And again, I put this one a little bit higher because you have white, and white searches for enchantments pretty well. So it's pretty easy for you to get those other mono white shrines and put them in play to give you that added advantage. And then you have the Spirit Tribal as well. So this one's actually not that bad. Definitely won't be very popular though. And finally at 36 is the black Gauchinte, Gauchinte of Hidden Cruelty. And this one I actually think is not bad. Beginning of your end step, you may pay 1. When you do, destroy target creature with toughness X or less, where X the number of shrines you control. Destroying creatures is pretty good. And even if you just have your commander in play, you can destroy a creature at the end of your end step with a toughness of 1. There's always going to be lots of creatures lying around. I'm sure you'll be able to find one that has at least 1. And again, you're in black. So again, I bumped this one up a little bit. I do like the ability, but also you're in black. So it's really easy for you to tutor for the other mono black shrines that can go in this deck as well. Coming in at number 35 is going to be Kosei the Silent Spider. 3 blue and a black human ninja 4/4. When Kosei the Silent Spider enters the battlefield, exile target card other than a basic land card from an opponent's graveyard. Search that player's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with the same name as that card and exile them. Then that player shuffles. For as long as you control Kosei, you may play one of the exiled cards. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. So, you know, when I did this in my spoiler video, I said it would be the least popular one from the set. It won't. The Myojins and the Gauchintes hadn't really come out yet. So this one you can actually do stuff with. You're very limited with the same name thing, right? The same name thing really kills this. There is no way around that where you can exile more than one thing. You still get to look at your opponent's hand. You still get to look in their library. That's good. This is only an ETB, so you are going to need some blinking if you want to do this again. It's sort of like a Gauchinte, I guess, a little bit, where you're doing this a similar thing. I'm going to ETB. I'm going to steal one of my opponent's things that I can later cast. I think Gauchinte might be better though, because with Gauchinte, you don't have to control it. If your Gauchinte dies, that card just sits in exile for the rest of the game. You can play it at any time. With Kosei, you can't do that. In fact, even the blinking thing doesn't work here unless you cast that card before you blink it, right? If you blink your commander without having casted that card yet, it's gone and now you can't get it, right? Because your blinking Kosei becomes a new Kosei that doesn't see the old exiled cards. So there really is a lot of limitations here. I definitely don't see this one being very popular at all. Coming in at 34 is Naomi, Pillar of Order. 3 white, black, human advisor 4/4. When Naomi, Pillar of Order enters the battlefield or attacks, if you control an artifact and an enchantment, create a 2/2 white samurai creature token vigilance. So again, very limiting in the fact that you have to have an artifact and an enchantment in play. I mean, that's not super difficult. The payoff here though is you get a 2/2 white samurai creature token vigilance, which is okay. It's not bad. There definitely is a few ways to go with this. Again, the power level's not high here, right? The uniqueness, not very high. You're just making tokens, and the versatility, the directions you can go, that to me is probably the high point here. You can go a few different directions with this, I think, which I like. Coming in at 33 33 is Haiko Yamazaki, the General. 3 in a red human samurai, 3/3 with trample. Whenever a samurai or warrior you control attacks alone, you may cast target artifact card from your graveyard this turn. So I think this is a pretty good commander. You know, you obviously can attack with your commander to get this trigger. Finding samurais and warriors in mono red, that's not going to be difficult at all if you don't want to have to attack with your commander. And casting artifacts from your graveyard, that's pretty good. There's a lot of ways you can build around that. Also, red does have a fair amount of red recursion with artifacts already, like Goblin Welder, that will fit in this theme. I just think that, you know, the fact that it is kind of unique, but there is already some red artifact recursion themes out there and commanders that are going to make this hold back a little bit. It is a little more limiting than those other ones. Coming in at 32 is Katsumasa the Animator. 2 blue Moonfolk Artificer, 3/3 with flying. Pay 2 and a blue until end of turn. Target non-creature artifact you control becomes an artifact creature and gains flying. If it's not a vehicle, it has base power and toughness 1/1 until end of turn. That's pretty interesting. And at the beginning of your upkeep, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 3 target non-creature artifacts. So this one, not very powerful, right? This is not a powerful ability. It is an interesting one. It's a unique one for sure. Is there a lot of ways you can go with this? Maybe. I haven't done a lot of research myself on this one. I just have a feeling this one isn't going to be very popular unless there's some sort of combo out there that someone discovers that might increase this. But what it's doing is very limited, just turning a non-creature artifact you control into an artifact creature, and it gains flying. Yeah, it's okay, you know, and it is a repeatable ability. At the end of the day, again, unless there's some combo potential and stuff, mostly what this is I'm turning my artifacts into creatures, putting counters on them, so it's mostly an aggro theme, which, you know, isn't super interesting. I want to point out I'm not necessarily knocking any of these commanders. I think this is a pretty interesting commander. There's probably a few different ways you can go with it. I'm just ranking these based on how popular I think they will be, and I do not think this one will be very popular at all. Coming in at number 31 is Norika Yamazaki, the Poet. 2 in a white human samurai, 3/2 with vigilance. When a samurai or warrior you control attacks alone, you may cast target enchantment card from your graveyard this turn. So of course, very similar to Haiko Yamazaki. This one I ranked a little bit higher though, because I like the enchantments in white a little bit better than the artifacts in red. And I just think that overall, there's a lot more powerful enchantments out there that you can keep reusing over and over and over. I like that a lot. And again, a lot of support in mono white for enchantments as well. I think this one will be a little bit more popular than the other one. Coming into the top 30, we got Goro, Disciple of Ryusei. 1 in a red, Goblin Samurai, 2/2. Pay a red, creatures you control gain haste until end of turn. That in itself's not bad, to be quite honest. If you really just wanted to build a goblin deck with this, because your commander is a goblin, obviously, a 2-mana commander that comes down right away and can give your team haste, not bad. More so though, you're probably going to want to build around the second ability, 3 red, create a 5/5 red dragon spear creature token flying, activate only if you control an attacking modified creature. You know, I mean, it's a little boring. It is kind of unique. Obviously, there's no other card that does exactly this, but you're just creating dragon tokens, which has been done before. You're attacking, obviously. It's just going to be an aggro theme. You're going to have the modified thing in there a little bit, so that's going to make it a little more difficult for you to build around. It's going to make it more interesting, but it's also going to make it more difficult. I think this one's definitely not going to be super popular. Coming in at 29 is Rasona Asari Commander. 1 red-white human samurai, 3/3 with haste. When Rasona Asari Commander deals combat damage to a player, if it doesn't have an indestructible counter on it, put an indestructible counter on it. Whenever combat damage is dealt to you, remove an indestructible counter from Rasona. So I think this is very interesting, very unique. There's no other commander that's doing anything like this. I know it seems like a very typical Boros aggro theme, and I think that's why a lot of people are going to avoid this commander. It does seem a little on the boring side. For me, the most interesting way you can go with this commander is with a nesting grounds, where you can actually move the indestructible counters from your commander onto something else. Like if there's a smothering tide that you don't want to lose, you put an indestructible counter on it, attack with your commander again, and it will reload the indestructible counter if you can connect with it, right? That's sort of the interesting way to go with this, I think. That's very fringe though. That is, you know, I mean, obviously getting the nesting grounds in every game is going to be a little tough for you. It is unique. It's definitely not too powerful, and I don't know if there's a whole ton of ways you can go with this. So for that reason, I think it's not going to be too popular. Coming in at number 28 is Shigeki Juke Visionary. 1 in a green. Legendary enchantment creature, Snake Druid. So it is an enchantment creature, a 1/3, and you can pay 1 and a green, tap, return Shigeki Juke Visionary to owner's hand. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped. Put the rest into your graveyard. And it has Channel. XX green green. Discard Shigeki. Return X target non-legendary cards from your graveyard to your hand. So there's a lot going on here. None of it is particularly powerful. I actually played against one of my patrons recently who put this deck together right away. And, you know, it's just a real value engine, or at least that's the deck that they made. Just lots of value. That's kind of how I see it too. It's not doing anything overwhelming. You're just returning your commander to your hand, putting a land in play, sort of a lot of rinsing and repeating. I like how the abilities sort of play into each other and there's a lot of synergy there. Ultimately, at the end of the day, though, I think this commander will not be very popular because I think a lot of people just won't know what to do with it, right? It's not really doing anything specific. It's very open-ended. So for that reason, I think it's not going to be very popular in the format. Coming in at 27, Yoshimaro, Ever Faithful. 1 white mana, dog, 1/1. Whenever another legendary permanent enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Yoshimaro, Ever Faithful. And has partner. And this was a very difficult one to evaluate, obviously, because it has partner. And its popularity is entirely based on the commanders that it will partner with really, really well. I myself haven't done the research yet to find out which ones this fits best with. There's a lot that it can just automatically slot into if you just want white in your deck, right? So if you're playing a Thrasios deck and you want white in the deck, you can just play this as a partner just to get the white. And it's just a creature that's going to sit there and get bigger and bigger and bigger. You don't really have to build around it. So it's good that way. So I think just for that reason alone, it's going to gain a little bit of popularity. But also you can definitely build around this, no question. This is a tough one. I think it definitely fits with a lot of different partners, but it's a tough one to evaluate for sure. Coming in at 26, the Reality Chip. 1 and a blue, legendary artifact creature equipment. Jellyfish. That is a massive card type. 0/4. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. That's pretty good. There is a lot of different directions you can go with that as long as the Reality Chip is attached to a creature. You may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. Also pretty darn good, and has Reconfigure 2 and a blue, which means you can attach it to a creature you control or unattach it from a creature. Reconfigure only as a sorcery. While attached, this isn't a creature. So while it's sitting on the battlefield, it's going to be a jellyfish, and while it's attached to a creature, it's going to be an equipment. And that's probably what you're going to want to do, right? You're going to want to have this equipped to a creature so that you can play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. Again, very similar to Shigeki. This is just so open-ended that I don't think people are going to know exactly what to do with it. There is a lot of things you can do with it, though. It is just a value commander, I think. You know, being able to cast spells and play lands from the top of your library is always going to be good in any deck. So you really could just make a good stuff mono blue deck with this if you wanted to. Or if you had any other strategy in mono blue that you really wanted, you could use this as your commander just to get card advantage out of it. Coming in at 25 is Atsushi, the Blazing Sky. 2 red, Dragon Spirit 4/4 flying, trample. And when it dies, you can choose one. Exile top 2 cards of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play those cards or create 3 treasure tokens. So the Dragon Spirit cycle in this set is going to be a little bit lower on this list because it does have that dies, and that can be a little difficult when you have a dies trigger on your commander, obviously trying to get it back over and over and over again. The red one for me is going to be the least popular of the bunch, simply because it is really difficult for red to keep getting their commander back over and over again. There's no recursion there. And yes, I know you can let your commander die and then put it back in the command zone and still get the trigger, but then your commander costs 6 the second time. So you just paid 4 mana for 3 treasure tokens. Now you're going to pay 6 mana for 3 treasure tokens. That doesn't seem very good. I'm sure there's a couple of infinite combos you can get into here. Okay, I don't know if that's particularly fun or if it's going to actually attract people to build this commander. I don't think that it is. So for me, it's going to be the least popular of the bunch. Coming in at 24 is going to be the green one, Kura, the Boundless Sky. 3 green, Dragon Spirit 4/4 flying and death touch. And when it dies, you may search your library for up to 3 land cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand. Or you can create an XX green spirit creature token where X is the number of lands you control. So again, green is a little bit better at getting stuff out of graveyards, right? The regrowth, the eternal witness effects. So for that reason, I put this one higher than the red one. It's a little boring. You're just doing a sort of mono green lands theme. You can, however, because you're searching for any land, you can do Thespian Stage and and Dark Depths if you want to do that combo in this deck. That might get a little boring doing that over and over and over again, right? I mean, there's like a million different ways to already search for lands and put them in your hands if you want to do the Dark Depths combo. It is an option for you if you want to throw that in the deck as well. You know, you're getting lands, you're making spirit tokens equal to your amount of lands you control. It's a lands deck in green. Not super exciting, but I think it is going to see some play. Coming in at 23 is Kma the Fractured Calm. 2, a red and a green. Spirit 3/3. At the beginning of your end step, goad each creature your opponents control that's enchanted by an aura you control. Put a +1/+1 counter on Kma the Fractured Calm for each creature goaded this way. So I just did a deck tech on this one on my channel. You can go check it out. So I'm not going to talk about it too much. The reason I have it a little lower though than maybe a lot of other people, I mean, it's interesting, no question. I think a lot of people might rank it higher. I think the fact that you're goading creatures hurts you a little bit here. People just really don't like having their creatures goaded. So commanders like this, I find, gain a lot of popularity in the beginning because they're doing interesting things, but then ultimately they start to lag in popularity because people just really hate having their creatures goaded, and annoying your opponents all the time can be a really bad strategy. So I think that might hurt this commander in the long run. But if you're interested in it, I got the deck tech on here already. Feel free to go check it out. Coming in at 22 is Kyrie the Swirling Sky, the blue dragon. 4 blue dragon spirit 6/6, flying ward 3, and when it dies you can return any number of target non-land permanents with a total mana value 6 or less to their owner's hand, or mill 6 cards, then return up to 2 instant and or sorcery cards from your graveyard to your hand. And this one I would have originally had at the bottom of all the dragons, but then I forgot, oh yeah, you can clone it. I forgot about that because blue doesn't have the recursion, right? This is the most expensive of the bunch, and you don't have recursion in blue, but you do have clone effects, which works really, really good with dice trigger. If you ever have a commander in blue that has a dice trigger, you can just cast like a cackling counterpart, make a token copy of your commander, and then you have to kill one of them, right? Because the legend rule applies. You have to sacrifice one. You sacrifice the token, obviously, and when you do, you get that dice trigger. So you can keep getting the dice trigger over and over again, which is pretty good. And then the added bonus is I can get that cackling counterpart back out of my graveyard again with my commander's dice trigger. So not bad. I don't think it's going to be super popular at all. I just thought, yeah, that actually casting instants and sorceries to clone your commander actually works really, really good there. So you actually don't have to do the recursion theme, which I think makes this a little better. Coming in at 21, Katori Pilot Prodigy. 1, a white and a blue, Moonfolk Pilot 2/4. Vehicles you control have crew 2, and at the beginning of your combat on your turn, target artifact creature you control gains lifelink and vigilance until end of turn. So the only reason I have this one as high as I do is because it is the precon, and so you have the precon factor here that, you know, whenever a commander is the precon commander, it's going to be a lot more popular than it normally would. This is really boring. This is one of the most boring commanders in the entire set, in my opinion. I mean, it's crewing vehicles. You're just going to do a vehicle tribal deck. We already have commanders that do that. This is just a white-blue version, but it is going to be fairly popular because it's a precon commander and because the build around is fairly simplistic. Not much to talk about though at all, of course. Getting into the top 20, and now we're getting into the commanders that I think are going to be relatively popular in the format. We are going to see them, from time to time and more on a regular basis as you get to the top of the list, of course. So Kosei Pentadine Warlord, 1 green Ogre Samurai 05. As long as Kosei Pentadine Warlord is enchanted, equipped, and has a counter on it. Kosei has, whenever Kosei deals combat damage to an opponent, you draw that many cards and it deals that much damage to each other opponent. So this is the commander that I think a lot of people really got excited about when they first saw it. I know on my Discord, a lot of my patrons were buzzing about it when it first came out. There is a lot to buzz about, no question. It's doing a lot. It is very unique, so you have the unique factor. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a Voltron commander. So it's a Voltron commander, but they're doing it in a very unique way. You can draw a bunch of cards, you can deal a bunch of damage to all your opponents. That's all really fantastic. There is a lot of hoops to jump through here though. So this to me is the commander that I think is going to be a lot more popular than 20 for the first couple of months. And then I think it's possible that people realize that it gets a little difficult to have to get the enchantment, the equipment, and the counter on it, and my opponents are always going to want to be killing it, right? As soon as I cast that aura to fulfill all of the conditions, my opponent just kills my commander, and then I got to start again from scratch. I think there's going to be a lot of that happening because your opponents are going to want to let you connect, draw a ton of cards, and then deal them all damage. It's going to be a 3-for-1 situation, I think, a lot of the times. So I think for that reason, a lot of people are going to get excited about this deck, play it, and then maybe lose a lot of excitement because of the way the game rolls out. But it's still going to be a pretty popular commander in the format, I think. Coming in at number 19, Junji the Midnight Sky, the Black Dragon, 3 black dragon spirit 5/5 with flying and menace. And when it dies, each opponent discards 2 cards and loses 2 life, so that's always going to be good. Or you can put target non-dragon creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control and you lose 2 life. That's also really fantastic. That's more what you want to build around. I suppose you could build a discard theme here if you wanted to. Lots of other commanders that you could be doing that with. The recursion effect, I think, is the better one. And the fact that you can get a creature out of any graveyard is great. You can do a mill here where you're milling your opponents, and so you have more options to grab out of their graveyard. Obviously, just entombing some huge creature from your own library into your graveyard so that you can cheat into play is great as well. Again, black has lots of great recursion for your commander, which also makes this higher on the list than a lot of the other dragons. It's going to be really easy for you to sacrifice your commander, get the dice trigger, and then reanimate it, get it back into play so you can do it again. That part is not going to be hard to do at all in mono black. You also have the access to the tutors as well. However, it's a tad boring. That's why for me, it's not going to be the most popular of the dragon series, just because what you're doing, you're just doing a mono black recursion theme or a mono black discard theme, whichever one you choose. There's a lot of other options for that already. There's not a ton of uniqueness there as far as I'm concerned. Powerful, it's pretty powerful, okay? The diversity and the uniqueness, not a lot going on there, I think. It is going to still be pretty popular, but the fact that you're doing a lot of the same things that black already does already, I think will hold it back. Coming in at number 18 is Ao the Dawn Sky, the white dragon, and the one that I think is just by a little bit going to be the most popular one from the set. 3 white dragon spirit, 5/4 flying and vigilance, and when it dies, look at the top 7 cards of your library. Put any number of non-land permanent cards with total mana value 4 or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. Or you can put 2 +1/+1 counters on each permanent you control that's a creature or a vehicle. So both fantastic abilities. I did this deck tech already on my channel. You can check it out if you want to. And I found a ton of ways. I know you think black is probably the best at recurring things, and it is, but white has an absolute ton of ways to be getting stuff out of the graveyard. And that's why one of the reasons why I put the white one as the highest dragon in the cycle. It's going to be really easy to get your commander back out of the graveyard once you sacrifice it, so you don't have to send it to the command zone. You can send it to the command zone if you want to, but you don't have to because you're going to have a lot of options there. And I just really like that first ability. Look at the top 7 cards of your library and put any number of non-land permanents with mana value 4 or less onto the battlefield. So as long as you fill your deck with stuff that's mana value 4 or less permanents, right, it's going to get you at least 3, maybe 4 things every single time. That's incredible value. And then later in the game, maybe when it's time to close out the game, now you can use that second ability, put a bunch of counters on all your creatures so you can close out the game. I think it's a pretty great build around. And there is a couple of different ways you can go with it, right? There isn't just one way to build this deck. There's a few different ways you can go with it. You could even do a vehicle deck if you wanted to, I suppose. So I like that about it as well. But coming in at number 17 is Ryu Storm's Edge, 2 red and a white human samurai, 3/3 with first strike. Whenever a samurai or warrior you control attacks alone, untap it. If it's the first combat phase on the turn, there is an additional combat phase after this phase. So I might be rating this one a lot higher than maybe I should. I think this is pretty darn good. It is a tad boring. You are doing the Boros, I attack and I get a second attack. I guess it's similar to Aurelia in a way. You know, how different is Aurelia going to be from this deck? Maybe not that different. However, as a Voltron commander, I think this is one of the best. I mean, if I'm just building a Voltron deck here, my commander's a samurai, so every time I attack with it, I'm going to get 2 attacks. I mean, what more could you ask for in a Voltron deck than I get to attack with my Voltron commander twice every single turn? That's pretty fantastic, right? So as a Voltron commander, this might be one of the best out there, I think. You load your commander up with a bunch of equipment or auras and just go to town with it. I think that's a pretty great strategy there. Coming in at number 16, Satsuki the Living Lore. Green and a white, Human Druid 1/3. Tap, put a lore counter on each saga you control. Activate only as a sorcery. When Satsuki, the living lore, dies, choose one. Return target saga or enchantment creature you control to owner's hand, or return target saga card from your graveyard to your hand. So I really like that there is that dies trigger on your commander, so that, you know, I always love when someone kills my commander, I get some value out of it. That's always fantastic. Obviously, this is a saga commander. You know, it's only in white and green, which is what's going to hold this back. If this was a 3 or maybe even 4 color commander, it would be way more popular. The fact that it's only 2 colors is the only thing holding it back. It's going to be popular. People are going to want to play it. There is, I think, enough sagas, especially with the new set in white and green, that you could make a deck with this no problem. I just think because of the white and green, a lot of people are going to shy away from this because it's just too limited on colors. Coming in at number 15, Greasefang Okiba Boss. 1, a white and a black rat pilot 4/3. At the beginning of combat on your turn, return target vehicle card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste. Return it to owner's hand at the beginning of your next end step. So I know people will say, well, why did you rank this one so high when you ranked the other vehicle commander so low? And that's because this one is just doing a lot more interesting things. First of all, its name is Greasefang. That alone, I think it's going to gain its popularity. It's Okiba Boss. It's a rat pilot. There's just a lot of interesting things there with the card itself that I think are going to make it a little more popular. Also, black and white, doing vehicles in those colors is definitely very unique, I think. And this is doing it in a very unique way. You're returning a vehicle from your graveyard to the battlefield. You don't even have to pay for it. It just happens at the beginning of combat on your turn. That's really good. So it's going to be very easy for you to discard vehicles into your graveyard that then you can immediately reanimate and use on combat. Then, of course, that will get returned to your hand, so you can just discard them again if you want to, right? Just a lot of great value here, a lot of interesting things you can do with it as well. It might be a tad on the boring side because you are limited to just using vehicles here, but I think it's a pretty interesting commander. Coming in at number 14, Kyoda, Soul of Kamigawa, 3 and a white dragon spirit 3/3 with flash and flying. When Kyoda, Soul of Kamigawa, enters the battlefield, another target permanent gains indestructible for as long as you control Kyoda. And you can pay Wooburg. Kyoda gets +5/+5 until end of turn. So I'm ranking this relatively high, even though it is pretty boring. This is a boring commander, no question. But I'm ranking it high because I know it's a 5-color commander, right? It's going to be usable for any 5-color strategy, any 5-color good stuff deck, any sort of deck where you want to do anything in 5 colors. This can be your commander, especially if you're building your deck around a specific permanent that you want to protect, right? Because your commander can make that permanent indestructible. This commander is 5 colors and completely open-ended, where you can just do so many different things with it. It's not particularly powerful. It's not particularly unique. It's just so versatile and in 5 colors that I think overall it's going to be really popular going forward. Coming in at number 13 is Shirokai Genesis Engine. 2, a white and a blue. Vehicle 8/8. Pay 1 and tap, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. Create a 1/1 colorless pilot creature token with this creature crews vehicles as though its power were 2 greater and has crew 8. And of course, it can be your commander. So the reason I'm rating this one so high is just because of that ability, okay? I don't even care that it's a vehicle, to be quite honest. I don't even know if you ever want to crew this. I mean, crew 8 is a lot, and then you just get an 8/8. You know, I mean, there's probably a lot of better vehicles out there that you could crew for a lot less. That ability to me is just really fantastic that you can do a lot with. Just pay 1, draw 2 cards, then discard a card, and create a 1/1 creature. If you just think about that in itself, that's really good value, right? Paying 1 to draw 2 and discard 1, so you're up a card and you get to create a creature on top of it. And then also you're discarding, so you can do a little bit of a discard theme. You can chuck stuff into your graveyard. You're drawing cards, so you can do a draw theme, right? I can throw a Chasm Skulker in this deck. I'm just draw 2 cards on top of the card I already draw on my turn. That's 3 counters I'm putting on my Chasm Skulker, right? So I can do a lot of stuff with this. This is actually a lot more versatile than I think people might think it is. To me, I'm just ignoring the whole vehicle thing. I'm ignoring the fact that my commander's a vehicle. I'm ignoring the fact that the tokens I'm creating can crew vehicles, and just building around the I'm drawing cards, I'm discarding, and I'm creating 1/1 colorless pilot creature tokens, because I think there's a lot you can do there. Coming in at number 12, Nashi Moon Sage's Scion. 1 black, rat ninja 3/2. Has ninjutsu 3 and a black, but of course it's not commander ninjutsu, so you're only going to be able to use that when it's from your hand, but you don't really need to, right? The ninjutsu is actually more expensive than your commander's casting cost, so there's no reason to actually do that. When Nashi Moon Sage's Scion deals combat damage to a player, exile a top card of each player's library. Until end of turn, you may play one of those cards. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost. So a lot of interesting things going on here. Again, very unique. You are casting your opponent's stuff, and that's not entirely unique. They're doing it in a very unique way. You are exiling the top card of each player's library, so that means you as well. So you can Vampiric Tutor, put something really expensive on top of your library that then you can pay life to cast, essentially cast it for free. You're paying life, but you can do it for free. So obviously that's a really powerful effect that you can do a lot with. So for that reason, I think people are going to be attracted to the I get to cast my opponent's stuff. I think people are going to be attracted to the I get to cast really big stuff essentially for free. There's a lot of aspects of this, even though it's not entirely unique. I think there's a lot of aspects here that are going to attract people to this. So it is going to be a fairly popular commander from the set. Coming in at number 11, Shishiro the Shattered Blade, 2 red-green, Snake Samurai 4/4. When an aura or equipment enters the battlefield under your control, create a 2/2 red spirit creature token with Menace. At the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each modified creature you control. So this one, again, is going to get a huge bump because of the precon effect. I think this commander is going to be, again, a lot more popular than it would be if it was just in the, the core set. But also, I think it's a pretty good commander, right? It is a red-green aura and equipment commander. We haven't really seen that at all. So that's relatively new. There are probably some interesting auras and equipment that will fit in this deck that might not fit in the typical, maybe Boros aura and equipment decks. You're making those spirit tokens, which is pretty interesting as well. You're putting counters on your creatures. You're doing a little bit of a modified theme. There is quite a bit going on there. This is not entirely a one-way street. I don't think there is some versatility here where you can do a couple of different things. This is probably more of a go wide strategy, as I talked about in the spoiler video that I did. Then I just load up my commander with a bunch of stuff. You are making those spirits, so you can load the spirits up as well. And you're putting +1/+1 counters on each modified creature you control. So this is more of a I go wide with my team of modified creatures, I think. Getting into the top 10, Hitotsugo Devouring Chaos. 3 and a black, Ogre Demon 4/4. Pay a black, sacrifice a creature, scry 2. And you can pay 2 and a red and tap, exile top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. When you exile a non-land card this way, Hitotsugo Devouring Chaos deals damage equal to the exiled card's mana value to any target. So I might have this higher than a lot of other people would. It might not seem that exciting. There's a lot going on here though, right? You're in a sacrifice theme. First of all, you're in a Rakdos, I sacrifice my creatures theme. You get to scry 2 when you do that, which of course is going to be really helpful with the second ability. You're exiling the top card of your library that you can then play, so it's impulse draw. That's card advantage. But then on top of that, when you exile a non-land card this way, which of course you're going to ensure that you are doing, it's going to deal damage equal to the mana value of that card to any target. So now I can throw giant expensive things in this deck to deal massive amounts of damage to my opponents. Or I can just put lots of great value-y cards in the deck, and if they cost 3 or 4, I can just use that damage to throw around to my opponent's creatures and pick them off as well. And it is not going to be difficult to untap your commander so that you can use this ability more than once each turn as well. I think there's actually quite a bit going on here, and the power level is pretty darn decent, I think. Coming in at number 9, Light Paws Emperor's Voice, 1 and a white, Fox Advisor 2/2. When an aura enters the battlefield under your control, if you cast it, you may search your library for an aura card with mana value less than or equal to that aura and with a different name than each aura you control. Put that card onto the battlefield attached to Lightpaw Emperor's Voice. then shuffle. So obviously the different name thing isn't going to matter here at all, right? As far as commander's concerned. So the way I'm building this deck probably would be I'm going to cast an aura on another creature, right? I don't think I want to load up my commander here because it's going to make it an easy target and I'm going to get blown out. I cast an aura on another creature and then go get an aura that I want to put on my commander. I think that's probably the route I go here. This is a really interesting one, right? It's not super powerful. You are tutoring. That's always good, but there is a lot of different directions you can go. Obviously, there's a ton of mono white auras throughout the history of the game that can go in this deck. So there's a lot of different directions you can go. And I think this is going to be a more popular one for that reason because of all the different directions. And also just very unique, right? There's just no other commander that's doing this kind of thing in the format at all. Coming in at number 8, Jin Kataxia's Progress Tyrant, 5 blue, Phyrexian Praetor, 5/5. Whenever you cast an artifact, instant, or sorcery spell, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. This ability triggers only once each turn. So, of course, that's a very fantastic ability. But also, whenever an opponent casts an artifact, instant, or sorcery spell, counter that spell. This ability triggers only once each turn. So, again, this was another one that I just wasn't sure where to stick it. A lot of these commanders are really hard to evaluate. That's why I decided to go with a ranking rather than a top 10. Even though this card is in my top 10, if I had done a top 10, this would not have been in there, okay? I don't think it's particularly interesting. It's a whole lot of good stuff, right? You just have two abilities, like most of the Praetors, you have two abilities that are just really, really good for you, and then another one that's really bad for your opponents. They're all sort of like that. So, you know, all the other Praetors, I'm not sure what the direction is you necessarily build, like a Vorinclex, or maybe even the original Jin Kataxias. That's just a whole lot of good stuff. Just good stuff for you, horrible stuff for your opponent. So there's not really a particular direction to go. Same with this. Also, you have the hate factor, or whatever you want to call it, that's going to hold this back. Clearly, this is a very powerful commander that I think would be a lot more popular if people knew that they weren't going to get hated out of games, which is definitely what's going to happen, right? A lot of people were calling for this to get banned as soon as it got spoiled, which I don't think is going to happen. It certainly is going to be an unfun commander to play against, just like all the other Praetors, though, right? All the other Praetors are pretty unfun to play against as well. You can go check out the popularity of those, right? Those ones aren't very popular either. Used to be. When I first started playing Commander, I saw them a lot more. I actually would see Vorinclex decks from time to time, never see them anymore because the arch enemy, you know, everyone hates on you right out of the gate. That factor really holds you back and just makes for a really unfun game a lot of times. However, just like a lot of commanders, like Turgid, for example, there's a commander that it's like, okay, well, everyone hates playing against it, but yet it's really popular still. So there is still people that are going to go and make this deck and play this commander. They're not going to care that everyone hates it. They're going to do it anyway. So that's why I put it where I put it. Coming in at number 7, and now we're getting to the really popular ones that I think that we're going to see quite a bit. Kodama of the West Tree, 2 and a green, Spirit, 3/3 with reach. Modified creatures you control have trample. And whenever a modified creature you control deals combat damage to a player, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. The uniqueness factor here is not super high. You are just sort of doing a lot of the same things green normally does. I mean, the modified term obviously is new, but at the end of the day, putting equipment and counters and stuff on your creatures, nothing new about that. Getting lands is certainly not new in green. Powerful though, no question. This only costs 3 mana, which I thought was incredible that they made it that cheap. Is going to go in a ton of decks as well. Like so many green decks out there are modifying their creatures and they're going to want this. This just seems like a really easy build around, right? Just I want to put creatures in my deck that have probably counters on them is the easiest way to go. You could obviously throw a Lightning Greaves or anything like that in the deck that you might not normally throw in there anyway. It's going to be very easy to do so because then your creature becomes modified. Having a turn 1 creature come down with a counter on it, and then once you play your commander, you can now attack with it and go get a land. Seems really, really good. And then obviously you can do the landfall theme as well because you're probably going to be having lands come into play over and over and over again. There is a few different ways you can go this. Like I wouldn't call it an incredibly versatile commander, but there is a few different ways you can go with it. Certainly is powerful, and I think we're going to see it quite a bit in the format. Coming in at number 6, Tatsunari Toad Rider, 2 and a black, human ninja 3/3. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, if you don't control a creature named Kma Kmi. Create Kmi, a legendary 3/3 black and green frog creature token with. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And you can pay 1 in a hybrid Simic mana. Tatsunari, Toad Rider, and target frog you control can't be blocked this turn except by creatures with flying or reach. So this is one that when I first spoiled it, I wasn't super impressed with. I thought, okay, well, you're doing a little bit of a Voltron strategy there where you want your commander to be unblockable, but you also are doing a little bit of frog thing where you're doing a sort of a frog tribal a little bit maybe. You're also doing enchantment tribal. I just thought there was almost too many directions to go with this, but I actually did a deck tech with this because I was like, oh yeah, auras are enchantments. So the aura enchantment theme works with the Voltron theme. So that all came together really, really well. So again, you can check out that deck tech on my channel if you want to. And really, there's a lot of other ways to go as well with this. I mean, you could even just do, I'm creating the token over and over and over again, right? I create it, I sacrifice some effect, cast another enchantment, get the token back, right? Just being able to get that frog token over and over and over again. That's a strategy you can go with. And of course, you can just do frog tribal, which I think a lot of people are doing as well. This will certainly be a popular commander in the format going forward, no question. Getting to the top 5, Tamishi Reality Architect, another commander that I did a deck tech for already, so feel free to check that one out. 2 in a blue, Moonfolk Wizard, 2/3. Whenever 1 or more non-creature permanents are returned to hand, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. And the important wording there is that this is returned to anyone's hand. So on your opponent's turn, if they play a bounce land and return a land to their hand, you get to draw a card, right? So that's pretty good. You actually don't even really need to build around that first ability that much because things do get returned to hand all the time in games. I mean, you'd be surprised. Usually you don't keep track of that kind of thing, but if you're playing this deck, I think you'll find it happens quite often. You can also pay X and white. Return a land you control to owner's hand. Return target artifact or enchantment card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. So of course, the second ability is going to play into the first ability, and when you return that land, you get to draw a card off of it. So that's great. Even if you just use this ability on your turn and don't worry about anything else, just drawing that extra card every single turn is great. And then obviously returning artifacts or enchantments from your graveyard to the battlefield is also great. I mean, there's a lot going on here. You can have a bounce theme. You can recur artifacts and enchantments from your graveyards. You're returning lands to your hand, which you can play into that theme as well. I sort of did a little bit of all of that in the deck that I made. There's just a lot going on here. As far as uniqueness, definitely very high. As far as versatility, incredible. There's lots of different ways you can go with this deck. I think most Tamishi decks you run into are not going to be playing hardly any of the same cards. And the power level also is pretty high here, right? A lot of people have talked about the combos that you can get into as well. So lots going on here. This is going to be a popular commander in the format for sure. Getting into the top 4, Ishin, 2 heavens as 1. Red, white, and a black human samurai, 3/4. If a creature attacking causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So when I first saw this guy, I wasn't super impressed. I thought, okay, well, he's like Wolfgar, right? I'm basically just giving you extra attack triggers. We've already done this, haven't we? Now we're just doing it in Mardu colors. However, as a lot of people pointed out, this is if a creature of anyone's is attacking, it causes this to trigger twice. So, for example, a Power Stone Minefield, one of my favorite cards that I just mentioned in a 10 cards video, that is whenever a creature attacks. So if a creature attacking causes that to trigger, right, because that is a permanent you control, it's now going to trigger twice. So any creature that is attacking is now going to take 4 damage right out of the gate for your Power Stone Minefield. So for that reason, even though this seems fairly one-dimensional, it's actually not. There is a lot of different ways you can go with it. Power level's pretty high here too. There is some pretty busted things you could do here as well, but the versatility here is really high. You know, it's not as high as say an Atraxa, but if you do a ton of research on this, I'm sure you could find a lot of interesting things that are triggering whenever creatures attack. So really interesting commander for sure. Coming in at number 3, Satoru Umazawa, 1 black and a blue, human ninja 2/4. Whenever you activate a ninjutsu ability, look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. This ability triggers only once each turn. Each creature card in your hand has ninjutsu 2, blue and a black, and there is the ability that of course everyone is going to build around. The first ability is just an added bonus, but Being able to have any creature you have in your hand ninjutsu out for 4 mana is ridiculous. This guy is going to be super popular just because he's super powerful. He's also unique. Obviously, there's no other card that does this, that gives other stuff ninjutsu, but the power level here is really high. This might be the most powerful commander from the set. It might even be more powerful than Yuriko. I don't know. Only time will tell. When Yuriko first came out, people didn't realize how powerful it was, right? A lot of people were like, hey, it's a Ninja Tribal commander, yay. Took a few weeks before people started to realize, hey, this commander is so powerful, you can actually play it in CDH. Is that going to happen with Satoru as well? I don't know. It's definitely going to be a popular commander. Obviously, if it's being played in CEDH as well, that's going to even more increase the popularity. It's going to be a commander that gets hated on, though, for sure. You're going to be the arch enemy if you show up to a casual table with this commander, I think. But the fact that it is as powerful as it is still not going to hold it back. I think it's still going to be really popular, even though it's going to be hated on. Coming in at number 2, and it was really difficult for me to decide which was 1 and 2. I went back and forth with it a little bit, but I sided on Hinata Dawn Crowned, 1 blue, red, and a white, Kirin Spirit 4/4, with flying and trample. Spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each target. Spells your opponents cast cost 1 more to cast for each target. This, originally when I saw it, I thought, okay, well, this will be the most popular commander from the set. It's a tough one. Maybe, maybe not. Definitely, I think it's going to be in the top 2. It is hitting all the buttons, right? It is hitting the powerful button. The power level here is really, really high. Even if you don't build around this at all, just your spells costing 1 less for each target. You know, I'm just going to cast a normal removal spell like a Fateful Absence. Now it costs 1 white. I'm just saving myself mana, right? And the spells your opponents control costing 1 more for each target. Again, now my opponent tries to kill my commander with their Fateful Absence and it costs 3 instead of 2, right? There's all upside here, right? It's all great. Even if you build just about any deck with this, it can be fantastic. This for me is very reminiscent to Atraxa. That's why I think it is going to be super popular in the format, because again, it's sort of like what Atraxa is doing with counters, Hinata is doing with spells, right? It's sort of the Jeskai spells version of Atraxa, the way I see it, because again, you just start digging and finding all these different spells that are targeting, and the more they target, the more they're going to cost less, which is more of an advantage for you, right? There's just a lot of different ways you can go with this. So the versatility is there, the uniqueness is there, and of course the power level is there as well. So I think this is going to be a really popular commander in the format going forward. But not the most popular. I decided to go with Gauchinte of Life's Origin as the most popular commander in the set. I don't know, it's a tough one. You go back and forth. I think in the long term, right, in a year when I revisit this set, I think we'll find that Gauchinte of Life's Origin has the most decks on EDH Rec at least. So 3 and a green, legendary enchantment creature, Shrine. 3/4. You can pay Wooburg and tap, return target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So on its own, just that, I'm now in a 5-color enchantment tribal theme, which a lot of people are doing already, right? So there's probably, I would say, thousands of decks out there already that were doing a 5-color enchantment tribal theme that will now just swap out whatever commander that was for this one, right? Because now they have a commander that is an enchantment and can also return any of those important enchantments they have from graveyard to the battlefield. And then, of course, when Gauchinte of Life Origins or another non-token shrine enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 colorless shrine enchantment creature token. So now you're creating enchantments as well. And of course, there's the shrine theme. That's where you mostly are going to want to use this. And that's going to make it really popular as well. A lot of people have been asking for this commander for a long, long time, for a 5-color shrine tribal commander. They finally gave it to us. And of course, for that reason alone, it's also going to be incredibly popular. So you're going to have the combination of a lot of things going on here that I think is going to make this commander probably the most popular from the set. So that is why I put it at number 1. And that is it. That is all ranking the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty commanders. There's 45 of them, a lot to talk about. It's a really long video. This is my guess essentially for how I think things are going to play out. When I revisit this set in a year and do my retrospective, we'll see how accurate I was on guessing how popular these commanders would be in the format. Certainly the top 10 in this ranking are commanders that you're probably going to see from time time to time at least, or very regularly. I don't know. It's tough to say now. I mean, there's just so many commanders in every single set that even the popular ones, you don't see that much. Even if you look at commanders like Wilhelt and Prosper, two commanders that came out last year, two of the most popular commanders in the entire format right now, I have yet to play against either of them. I have not seen either of those commanders out in the wild. So it's crazy to think that we have so many commanders, like 45 we just had. That's a lot. And there's so many commanders that come out in every set that, you know, even if they are really, really popular, you still don't necessarily see them that often. So it's weird to think about it that way. But that is all. Let me know below where you think I was wrong and where you think maybe a lot of commanders that I ranked would be higher than where I ranked them, or commanders that I ranked you thought might be lower. Let me know. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.